Ladies and gentlemen, it's currently February 2023, and millions of people are playing chess for the first time. You may be watching this right now as a beginner, as an intermediate, as an advanced player. I'm not too sure, but in this video, I'm going to show you how to crush your friends, your enemies, loved ones, co-workers in chess in as little as 4 moves. Now, some of you experienced players might be thinking, oh, it's just the scholar's mate. What a waste of a video. No. I am going to show you how you can effectively defeat chess players in this video by bringing your queen out early and breaking the traditional rules of chess that you have probably been taught. The video is split into 2 parts. In the first part, we'll just look at the moves, which are also in the description. You can put those into a chess.com analysis board if you want. And then I play 1 training game against an intermediate subscriber of mine. Let's go. So you are the Gotham subscriber. With white, you get an honorary Grandmaster title, and this high rating, your opponent is goofy and is a random noob, and you will start the game with e4. So all of these moves are in the description. The very first thing we're going to look at is e5, queen h5. Now, this might be completely ridiculous to some of you, but like, no, this breaks everything I know about chess. Well, in this segment of moves, I'll show you that this is not what you think it is. Now, for the untrained folks, all right, you starting with the king's pawn and you getting e5, if you play e4 on the first move of the game, you are going to face e5 60% of the time. Queen h5 sets a trap. You target this pawn with check, and many beginners here will play the move g6. That's number 1. Get ready to beat a whole bunch of people. If you're watching this as a beginner, you are going to gain 100 points, maybe 200-300 points, just from capturing this. And if they go here, you block, let's say like this, and get the queen out. g6 is a huge mistake. Now, the more common move is to defend this with the knight, okay? And we will be looking at that in a moment. It doesn't really matter if black plays d6. You can continue the same way that we will against knight c6. Some people go here. Against this, obviously, you take. With check, you trade queens if it's possible. If the bishop blocks, you defend your pawn like this, and you get out, and you're just a pawn up. The computer likes to think that black can catch up in development with moves like d5 and being really aggressive, but with white, if you just consolidate and play smart, you will be fine. The position is equal, and more often than not, your opponents will just try to castle and chase your queen around, and if you play in a smart way, like bring your queen back and consolidate, you'll be in great shape. Computer thinks it's equal. Your beginner opponents are not computers. So, knight c6 is by far the most common move, and now you play bishop c4, and you are threatening to win the game right here. Again, beginners. Many of your opponents will do this. Game over in 4 moves, you can feel like a genius. But this is not the end of the video. You see, I'm actually going to tell you that many people will stop your 4-move checkmate. I got news for you. It's not that bad. It's actually not that bad. It's actually a lot more poisonous than you might think. Let's take a look. You can now not take this pawn because of this. So you come back and threaten it again. Beginners, a lot of your opponents will go here, thinking they forked you. Good game. Queen f7 is mate. So a lot of people, when you come back, will block. If they block with the queen, you're not worried about a queen trade, but it's not checkers. You do not have to take. You can go there and force them to try to take you. If they do this, you have 3 pieces out, and here's a way you can win the game. In 7 moves, knight b5 attacks the pawn on c7, threatening a fork, and what you do here is very simply damage their pawn structure like so. While chess.com lags a little bit because of servers, d3, damage structure, 2 bishops, which is considered an advantage, and plus 1.4. All right, so queen f6, not good. Knight f6, much more common, all right? Oh, did I tell you, by the way, that I will also give you early queen attacks, not just in e5? Yeah, well, I'm going to give you early queen attacks against almost all of black's major defenses. Aren't you happy you clicked on this video? I'm happy you clicked on this video. Everyone's happy. Win, win, win. Terrific. Knight c6, bishop c4, let's come back. And now, folks, very important. You must stop this by playing knight e2. Okay? And the rest is actually very simple. You play d3, knight c3, and you castle. You just castle. The position is equal. I mean, it's a balanced position. The computer thinks it's a 0.1 or whatever. But as a human, this is a tough position to play with black. And you're going to see in the training game exactly what I mean by that. White has a lot of different attacking possibilities. You can play h3, and you can play knight g3 and bishop g5. When you pin the knight to the queen, you have ideas of knight d5, applying even more pressure. I wouldn't rush with this move because of the move h6. And I don't actually think that trading this bishop for the knight is the goal. The goal is to play like this. So having that, and that pressure on that knight. Very, very common here for white to win like this. I wouldn't rush with the move bishop g5, but the position is still very, very decent. Now, if you want to play really aggressively, I don't condone this way because the engine doesn't love it, but if you want to go bishop e3 and then play like h3 and maybe g4 and maybe long castle, you have my blessing. If you want to play like that, where you do this and then just launch these pawns forward, that's another really interesting way of playing this position. There are fascinating possibilities to build behind your active queen. And you will be shocked at the amount of times you get to this literal position right here. And, newbies, if you want to be a little bit more risky, you have to stop knight e2, but then you can also play like g4, g5 like straight away, but that's not what the engine doesn't give that the blessing. But that's the general idea. And the position is equal. I mean, the engine is the engine. Your opponents are your opponents. You're going to see how a 1300 a little bit later totally fell apart just one or two moves on their own in this position. So this is a very trappy and actually mildly underrated way to play chess for fun. Now, you should not play queen h5 if you want to go, be a grandmaster necessarily. But if you're just an adult, a teenager, you just want to have a little fun, cheese a few people, win a few games quickly, like when you're on the toilet at work, 5-10 minutes, and then you got to go back and do your stand-up because you code or something. Play a couple queen h5, slap a few fools around, you're going to have a great time. And the amazing thing is, there are ways to bring out the queen, even in the Sicilian defense. Now, I don't necessarily condone this, but, you can play like knight c3, and then you can play d4, take with the queen, drop the queen back, and actually, even this is a variation. This is called the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian. You can fianchetto, you can castle, and you're actually in a relatively decent position. The Sicilian, you could play queen h5. That has been played before, but the difference is that your opponent hasn't pushed the pawn to e5. That is the major difference. So if you try to do this, what might happen is they will go here, defending their pawn, and your queen's a bit dumb. But you're more than welcome to try. I'm telling you, against the Sicilian, it's not that possible. But against the Caro-Kann defense, this is called the Goldman variation. Knight c3 and queen f3. Hello. I mean, it's a potent weapon. Look at this trick. If they attack your knight, you have bishop c4, hitting f7. If they take your knight, you have queen f7, obliterating their position. You can even do this. Bishop out, castle, you're just winning in 5 moves. So, I mean, there are ways, and here's another really nasty trap against the Caro-Kann. It's knight c3, d5, queen e2, with the intention of lining up a threat here, and if take, black tries to go here to enable this move, this is a very famous trap. And this is checkmate in 5 moves. 5 moves. They cannot take you because of this. Ridiculous. And if they play knight f6 and they don't blunder checkmate, then you take, you damage their pawns, and then you just develop. Knight f3, take the center, develop the bishop, castle. You play a little bit more normally. There are ways to bring out your queen early against other openings as well. They are not as emphatic as e5, but if you're an e4 player, you will face this 3 out of every 5 games, maybe more, 3.5 out of every 5 games, something like 7 out of 10 games. I got news for you. This is not as bad as it looks. And I'm like, you got to know how to equalize with black, but this is not a losing move. It's actually shockingly potent. Like if you want to go and give it a shot and see what happens and try to, memorize this line with queen f3, knight e2, and then knight c, like, you'll be shocked. You will actually be quite surprised at how decent this is. Especially if you play it right, And if they ever jump their knight into the center, you can just take, come back, or this way, trying to get this pawn. You can also play knight d5. Black doesn't get a whole lot here. Another very common blunder that happens is knight d5 and then bishop g4, where they attack your queen defended by the knight, but you take the knight with check and then you win the bishop. This is also a very, very common thing that occurs. You'll be surprised. Anyway, look, folks, I've made a lot of instructional content on my YouTube channel, and sometimes I just gotta give you the goodies. Like, this thing is not as bad as it seems. Go give it a shot. If it doesn't work, all right, no problem. But I am telling you, under the 800 level, this move is going to psychologically rattle some of your opponents. And when you're below 500-600, get ready to start catching fools with this nonsense, because, oh my goodness. And so you can use Queen H5 up to a point, then you can retire it. It can be a thing in your past, but this thing works and it's deceptively strong. Now, let's go look at the game that I played against the 1300. And we are going to try to test out our very, very bad habit opening. Queen H5, Knight C6 on the board. Played very quickly, by the way. All right, so we are going, in fact, for Scholar's Mate. Opponent is very confidently refuting it. My opponent doesn't know that it's coming, but I assume that, you know, by this level of chess, you have seen this enough that you do, in fact, know what you're doing. So now I'm going to drop back to F3. And this is everything we've studied. So now it's important to cover this move, which we will do with the very natural Knight E2. And we will just play from here. So as we already have described, these two moves next make a lot of sense. It really doesn't make a huge amount of difference how you play them. And my opponent did not know that any of this was going to happen. I just told them, you know, I asked who plays E4, E5, and this is how we got here. So in the study, I looked at D6. A6 is also a reasonable move, but it's not really meeting the demands of the position. You can go bishop G5, as I described earlier. You can also just castle and just sort of relax for now. I think to build mildly good habits outside of playing this, you know, very silly opening, we obviously should castle our king. Bishop G5 will always be met with H6 if the opponent is clever. So let's just play. We can play bishop E3 to stop knight D4, and bishop G4 we just slide over. We're not really worried about that. This is always a good move. And if you don't want your bishop to get trapped, you can just play A3 and bishop back to A2. And your position is actually very decent. Like, just because you play 4-move Scholar Mate doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you're going to lose. By the way, Queen E7, now bishop G5 is a very powerful idea. The point of bishop G5 now is that knight D5 actually attacks the queen. The difference when the queen was on that square is that when H6 happened, I actually have to move my bishop. But right now I can go danger levels. You don't have to move the bishop. You don't have to acknowledge a threat if you can create equal or exceeding danger. And now here comes knight D5 and we're already winning. You see, that's actually one of the incredible ideas here, that I don't have to move. This is what I wanted to accomplish anyway, and now black is lost. I'm now going to be winning a queen for 2 pieces, which is still not an advantage that is like absolutely game over. But it's, you know, it's a very big advantage. But of course, we should teach you how to convert this position as well. When you have a queen, you obviously don't want it to be trapped. And you got to think about what your opponent wants to do. I would imagine that my opponent wants to play something like F5 in the future and get the king out of the way. I want to make a few pawn trades, and I don't want to allow his knight to jump in. So I'm going to start with C3. The idea is to prevent his knight from coming in, and then I will slide my knight over here. Okay, that's just a very natural move. I will play bishop B3. It's actually not the easiest position to win. I mean, a queen is good, but it's only going to be good if I can actually trade off enough of my opponent's pieces that my queen is left alone. A queen is most powerful when it's teamed up against weaknesses or when it's just dealing immense damage against the position that doesn't have a lot of resistance. Right now, black actually has a pretty good amount of resistance here. I would love to play this move successfully at some point. Okay, King H8 is very smart, trying to prepare this. I've already described that this move is likely on the way, but let's continue with our plan. Now our queen always has a getaway square. It's a powerful piece, but we do need to protect it like a gem, you know, like a precious gem. If F5 happens, don't be worried. Queen can always escape. And I would love to trade off a knight and then maybe trade off a bishop, and slowly black's pieces will lose resistance. In a perfect world, I trade the rooks. With no rooks on the board, no amount of material is going to be able to save black, because a queen, the value and power of the queen will increase as as everything goes on, as the game goes on. This is a bad move. It is a free pawn, but you do not want to make captures that end up pinning you so viciously to your own pieces. So bishop f7, there is this or this, and that would just simply not be good for me. I can go for a pawn trade. I can also bring my queen just out of danger and see what's next. Because we both have 8 pawns in this position, it's a closed position. And in a closed position, you want to try to find those opportunities to trade. There is one pawn trade. So every time a pawn trade occurs, something changes in the position. That bishop opens. My rook opens. The e-file opens a little bit. Now, of course, in a dream situation, I can completely shut my opponent down in their side of the board and just try to kind of, steamroll them. But I think it is a good idea to kind of back out with the queen at first. But this is everything that and I didn't tell my opponent to play this. All I told my opponent was that play well, I didn't even say e5. I actually asked for a volunteer who plays e5. And then I said, you can play knight c6 on the second move. And that's it. Everything else my opponent completely did on their own, just to show you how natural this type of play is, even at the 1300 level. So you can win these games, like bringing your queen out. It's not necessarily great, but it's also not as bad as you might think. Now, we need to think of ways we can be attacked, which is, of course, how you have to think about things in chess. Now, this is a very different story. Okay, so I can trade bishops, and now I can trade rooks. That is an excellent simplification for me. Now, I think what I will do now, there's a lot of good ideas. That's a good idea to target both pawns. This is a good idea, but I want to stick to simplification, all right? And by the way, if any of you are still watching this far in the video, one of my courses, Middle Games Masterclass, is one of the chapters is on converting winning positions. And this is one of the ways. Simplifying, bishops off, rooks off, trade a pawn, trade another pawn. If you leave a queen against the knight and a bishop, the queen will obliterate the knight and the bishop. But on a full board like that, you have to be a little bit careful. So rook f1 is coming. I'm going to take a little bit more central space. And then we will start kind of poking with the pawns. All right? So I'm going to take the center space. Just a good move. A little bit more activity in the center of the board. Maybe d5 in the future. Now my queen sees that. Right? So here comes a4. Look at that. Utilizing my previous pawn move. Knight is going to struggle to move here. I can't really do a whole lot. I could have played e5, by the way. Just a little moment here. I could have played e5, which would have attacked the knight, forced it to move, and we're just going, again, pure simplification. That's what we're doing, removing the rooks. This is a very instructive moment here beyond the opening. The right way to simplify one of these positions. I don't want my opponent to resign either. I would, if they run out of time, they run out of time, but I do just want to show, like, that is the way you would convert this position. That knight is in the corner. I can go after it. For simplicity, I'm just going to take the pawn. And I got to be careful. Like, I don't want to move my queen and lose my pawn, but I'm going to go here. I thought that was hanging, actually. That was a blunder by me. Well, not a blunder, but, I want to go there. And I want to just start hunting and just showing you the power of the queen when it's left alone against other pieces. Nothing can move, So I can go to c6, which targets that, and that, and that, and that. Of course, e5 can be taken. Then I will take on a6. Yep. I have to avoid forks, and I have to be careful about checks. That's the only thing. I can continue to hunt. I can bring my queen here. Just make sure that that's actually, okay, that's... I can even play what's called an in-between move. Checking the king, and then going here. And now it's queen versus 2 knights, and they are just simply not strong enough, as I will push. And the queen can also go backwards. But let's say you forget about that, right? Let's say you don't take. Just make sure that the knight cannot check you. Once again, the knight cannot check you, and just don't hang your queen. And even if you do, you'll make a new one. But yeah, this is just very clean. b7 is on the way. And this is the way you would convert this position. Nice and simple. 3 seconds left, and black resigns. That was a nice game. Now, again, just a very quick analysis. This is literally everything in the video, with the one exception being, okay, black played a6, but we had a very reasonable position early. You know, I could have played h3 here maybe. I could have played a3 to prevent, you know, the bishop from getting stuck. I decided to go bishop e3, a waiting move, but you can play either of these. And the reason why this move didn't quite work is because of h6. And I don't like taking. I don't think this gives you any advantage. But you can go bishop g6 and then come back and just try to target that. But personally, I thought, you know, going bishop like this was nice. And the only way my opponent could have prevented that was to probably play bishop e6, and they didn't. So we just immediately got a winning position. So that goes to show you that the 4-move checkmate, as dumb as it is, actually packs a punch beyond the 4 moves. As long as you know what you're doing, and you can play aggressively and still try to beat people, but you can also be in it for the long haul. So give it a shot. Don't count this as a completely stupid option. It works best against e4, e5, but as I've shown you, there are other ways to bring your queen out early when you play the king's pawn that are not that dumb and that are still very, very possible to put opponents under pressure. So, you know, the chess purists, the experts might look at this and say, oh, this is just bad. What a terrible habit you're building. Well, actually, it's not as simple as it looks. And the better you get at chess, the more rules you can break, the more principles you can go against. As long as you follow it up with good fundamental play afterward, you can beat a lot of people by bringing out your queen as early as 4 moves. But in this game, you know, 10 or 15, and the game is over. So enjoy. Hope you liked the video. And the moves are in the description once again for you to copy paste, like on chess.com, in an analysis board, for example. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.